Hey, it's Shirley B, and I believe we all have the power to change our lives for the better. And my goal is to help you believe and know that. Your mindset is your power, and change can sometimes feel overwhelming. So instead of focusing on all the huge things that you may feel you need to do in life, let's instead focus on small mindset shifts, small actions that anyone can take, so that little by little and piece by piece, you will change your life. Welcome back, or if this is your first listen, then just plain old welcome. Either way, I'm so glad you're taking the time to listen and do something for yourself. Regardless of what type of change you're looking to make, whether it's a small change at work, at home, physically, internally in your thoughts, or any other way, it takes a form of action. And if this action was easy for you to make, you would have already made it, so stop beating yourself up for not doing it yet. If you're still thinking about what to do and how to take that next step, remember that change sometimes requires bravery to take that next step, to move in a different way, to live in a different way, to think a different way. It takes bravery to step outside our comfort zone. Nelson Mandela said, "Courage was not the absence of fear, but the triumph over it. Brave man is not he who does not feel afraid, but he who conquers that fear." So how do you find the strength to conquer that fear, as it does take strength? And fear, while it feels real, typically it's tied to the story you tell yourself and have made up in your mind. Of course, there is real life or death fear, like a lion charging at you, but I'm going to guess the majority of you are not on safari and facing that life or death fear, so let's talk a little bit about how to find the strength to overcome the fear that may be preventing you from moving forward. So, other than the lion coming to eat you, typically fear is just a perceived threat or danger to you. And the key word there is perceived. It's our thoughts that generate that fear. We have so many thoughts in our head, and we use many of those to tell a story of all the horrible things that could happen if you do this or if you don't do that. We average over 60,000 thoughts per day, and the majority of our thoughts tend to be negative, and of those negative thoughts, they also tend to be repetitive, and repeating those negative thoughts can be the source of your fear. Those negative, repetitive thoughts and stories that we have on replay in our minds. It could be a large fear, such as losing our home if we decide to make a change to a new career, or losing our family if we make a change such as stating we're not happy in our relationship. It could be a smaller fear of being embarrassed to fail at trying something new, or the fear of rejection by asking someone out on a date. But even fears I or someone else might say is small, it's all relative and based on each person's situation. So, what I might think is inconsequential to me could be extremely significant to you, depending on the story and the repetitive thoughts we have, and also what we value. But how do you find the strength and courage to face your fears? Because that's the key. Once you face them, you see them in the light. You many times find they are not as bad as you made them out to be. It's shadows that you see on a wall where they look big and scary, but it's just the way that you're looking at them. Once you shine the light differently, you see it wasn't really a big scary bear, but the shadow of something else, something smaller, something that maybe has no power over you once you see it for what it is. It's our minds not fully looking at things in the light and just feeding and growing that shadow with our own perceptions of what might be or not be. And don't think there's anything wrong with you. We all have fears that we create. Some are scars from prior relationships, some are from prior life decisions that we're still having to live with, and some could be left over from what we may think are silly things from our childhood that took on a life of their own, even if we know logically it shouldn't matter. But it does. So, how do you address any of these or all of these? One thing I like to do is ask myself, what's the worst that could happen? And then ask again, and then what? What happens if the worst does in fact happen, and what would you do? How would you feel? Would it matter in a year? So, for example, starting this podcast, I certainly had fears of failing and still do. I've no idea where this will go, and thankfully, I've not put much money into this. So, the worst for me that could happen is that no one listens. It slowly loses steam, and I'm creating an episode every couple of weeks for family or friends that are nice enough to listen. So, then what? Am I okay with that? Would I have learned something in the process? Maybe what to do better next time? And maybe there isn't a next time, and I can just be proud of trying. And maybe I'll continue with just a handful of listeners and know I'm at least having a smaller positive impact, and maybe I'm okay with that. But then I also think if the worst could happen and I can live with it, then think about what's the best that could possibly happen. Well, it takes off. I have a larger positive impact. I leave a legacy. Maybe I have a little retirement income in the process. So if you've talked through the worst and can live with it, then think about, wouldn't that worst bit be worth a chance at the best that could possibly happen? So, what if you found the strength to make changes and move your life forward in the way that you've imagined it to be? And first, let me say I'm proud of you for that. Take a moment and be proud of yourself and acknowledge what you've accomplished. It may be a small change, but as we've discussed, it's these small changes that can add up to a whole new way of life and outlook. But sometimes those changes can have an impact that you didn't see coming. You showing your strength may make those around you feel envious of that strength and of the joy you're finding in the positive movements forward. They may be intimidated by your new found way of moving and may feel that you're moving past them. And all of that is okay for them to feel and okay for you to acknowledge. You have to trust that your journey has brought you to feel the need for change and trust that their journey brings them to where they need to be and when they need to be there. And part of their journey may be to watch you grow. And if they truly are supportive of you, they'll eventually cheer you on once they see your joy, once they know where they continue to fit in your life. And maybe they'll be motivated to make their own changes. And if some don't like the changes you're making, then don't focus on their negativity, but focus on what positive impact you're having and be patient that for some it takes time to accept change. Just like it took time for you to find the courage and strength to change, it may take courage and strength and time for others to build that to find their place back in your circle. And let's face it, if the fear that's holding you back is that you're afraid to disappoint someone or someone won't be happy with you, well, then it will be the never ending story because you can't possibly make everyone happy. And sometimes the decisions and changes you need to make may disappoint others. But ask yourself, if you feel proud of the decision you've made, is this change doing right by you? If you're not disappointing yourself and it feels right in your heart of hearts, you know you're not purposely hurting anyone, then be proud of that strength that has moved you forward because ultimately you know deep down what you need. And it will be right even if it doesn't feel like it, but in time you may be able to look back and see it differently for what it is, your right choice. And don't be afraid to ask for help as you're looking to move forward. Asking for help is not a weakness. It's actually one of the strongest things you can do for yourself. And you may be amazed at how many are already around you that have been where you are and are willing to show you the way forward. And remember, there's no failing here. There is the lesson of success or the lesson of learning. I heard Sarah Blakely, who invented Spanx, say something to the effect that if you're trying something new and you have no idea what you're doing, then maybe that means you're just going to do it differently. So it may not be the right or wrong way, but the way that works for you. There's so many podcasts out there to listen to. There's over 3 million to listen to, but no one else has my voice. No one has my thoughts. No one has my experiences. So I'm going to do it differently just by being me and having looked at the worst and the best that could happen. I'm okay with however this turns out. Another common fear is based on age, that you've missed your time to do something, that you're too old to start now or you'll look silly trying. I would argue that having the years of knowledge and wisdom behind you, whether you're in your 30s or your 70s, that you may know yourself better now and will understand how much you can take on and how better to deal with the stumbles that may occur. And sure, some might think that you're silly, but do you think it's silly? Do you think that if you're willing to make the time for it, to power through your fear, that it's worth the knowledge at the end? One of the best things you can do for yourself is to not take yourself so seriously and be able to laugh at yourself. And you may find that others will look at you and say, wow, that's amazing that they're trying. I wish I could try. And they may ask, how did you find the courage? And now that you have another positive impact in sharing how you've moved past your fear, and sharing this podcast could be part of it. And I'll share that here I am almost 60 starting a podcast. But how old will I be next year if I didn't start a podcast? Guess what? I'll still be turning 60, but I'll still have tried and I'll still have accomplished something that I wanted to do regardless of how it turns out. So what if you apply for a job and don't get it? Maybe you'll find something more you need to brush up on, or maybe you'll at least get over your nerves and be more comfortable with your next interview. And what's the worst if you tell your partner that you're not happy and you want to talk things through? Okay, the worst could be that you find your partner doesn't want to put in the effort, and you realize now that this person isn't as invested in making the relationship work and isn't as caring about your happiness as you are. And yes, that would suck and it's going to hurt. But don't you deserve a relationship where your feelings are valued and you're loved and supported as much as you are loving and supporting? But then what's the best? That your partner didn't even realize you weren't happy, and you open the door to honest dialogue where you both can be caring and supportive of each other. And even with the worst, if your partner doesn't want to move forward, well, there can be the best out of that eventually, because maybe you finally realize you deserve to receive as much as you give. And maybe the best of that worst is that you're able to learn that about yourself and you don't accept less in the next relationship. Shift your perspective and how you're looking at what you want to do or what are you doing. Changing your perspective and seeing things from other sides and both sides of the best and the worst can help give you the strength to overcome your fears. So puff up your chest, take a deep breath, face your fears, shine the light, and turn all those big scary shadow bears into bunnies. Remember and know that you've done hard things and you have the strength to do more hard things. You've been embarrassed and you still got up and kept at it the next day. You've been hurt and you've healed, and you know that you will come out stronger. So think about the worst that can happen and weigh that against the best that can happen. And you will find your strength and courage that you've always had, and you'll know when the change is right. And if it isn't right now, that's okay. You still have thought things through, and that's one step closer. When it feels right, you will take that leap of faith and know that no matter what, you will land. And whether you land gracefully like a world-class gymnast or wildly flailing like a clown learning to skate, you will land. Brush yourself off and know that you're doing it with all the light shining to not only see and face your fears, but continue with more knowledge and light for your way forward. If this podcast helped in any way, I know that you know someone else trying to face their fears, so please share this with them. Keep shining that light, little by little, and piece by piece. This podcast is based on my own life experiences. I'm not a therapist, a psychologist, psychiatrist, or any other licensed medical professional. Please share this podcast with anyone you think needs to hear this so that we all move forward, little by little and piece by piece. And thank you, Purple Planet, for sharing your music.